This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's MotorWeek. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss, and we are going to talk about cars today. And we're going to talk about motorcycles and gifts relative to Harley Davidsons and so on with Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson. That's coming up in just a moment. But first, when asked if they need winter tires, most drivers say absolutely not. But push for more information, and you quickly realize their reasoning is wrong. Their first mistake is confusing old-fashioned snow tires with modern winter tires. Remember, today they are not snow tires, they're winter tires, which are vastly different. No matter if your car has front wheel, all-wheel, or four-wheel drive, and you drive when it's cold, you probably need winter tires. Although all-season tires are better than summer tires, they're not close to winter tires. Most drivers look at winter tires as a better way to get moving in snow, but that's not what winter tires are all about. Winter tires are about maintaining the car's ability to steer and stop. Getting going is not the issue because if you think about it, no one has ever lost control of their car or had an accident because the car can't get out of the driveway. No, indeed. It's the loss of stopping and steering control that get drivers hurt or killed in winter. As normal tires get colder, their rubber gets harder, and they lose their ability to grip the road. That loss of grip on the road causes cars to lose traction and their ability to stop and steer. A lot of winter accidents happen when there is no snow or ice on the road, just cold temperature. Unlike conventional tires, winter tires use different rubber compounds and tread designs to maintain traction at low temperatures, and yes, in snow too. Remember, even the most exotic four-wheel drive system becomes zero-wheel drive when the tires lose their grip on the road and you lose control. The drive system has nothing to do with how the tires grip the road, so concentrate on tires first. If you drive when the thermometer dips to 32 degrees or lower, you'll be a lot safer if you install 4 winter tires. But the ugly truth is that even with 4 winter tires, you won't magically become a better driver. See, if you're a dangerous driver, you will still be a dangerous driver. Look at the chaos just an inch or two of snow brings. Whenever there's reduced traction from snow, ice, or even rain, many of you just aren't smart enough to be safe because you won't slow down. Even all-wheel drive only helps get you going. It has nothing to do with stopping or steering, and stopping and steering is what keeps you from hitting things. Also, if you're one of those nut jobs that waits till the last millisecond to get into the proper lane, you could wind up sliding out of control on snow or ice. You see, every move must be smooth because a hasty tug on the steering wheel can cause loss of traction and you're instantly out of control. But the most bizarre thing drivers do in snow is floor the accelerator. You see them everywhere, engines just screaming, tires spinning wildly, and the car not moving. They must think that foot on the floor will somehow magically make the car gain traction. When a tire is spinning, it has lost all traction, and making it spin faster only makes matters worse. To maintain or regain traction in snow, be very gentle on the gas. So gentle the engine is barely above idle, which will help the car move slow. Slow and steady, well, and extremely gentle will usually get you there and back when it snows. Don't understand this? Then stay home. All right. Ah, yes, we have Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson. Lyndon, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right.
So what, you didn't talk about why, if winter tires are better, why not just run those all year long?
Because the softer rubber compounds that make them stick when they're cold wear out very rapidly
quickly,
when
right.
The weather gets hot.
Just figured you should close that loop.
Yes, good point. All right.
You know, traction is certainly a subject that's near and dear to my heart because it's so much more important on a motorcycle than it is in a car. Well, I don't know. It's more important to the rider of the motorcycle probably than the average car driver, because if we lose traction on a motorcycle, we generally fall down, whereas the car driver just hits somebody else, and then they call it an accident. But you know, I like to say that traction is like money. It's easier to hang on to than to get back. So smooth is the key. Don't break traction, and you hang on to it.
Right. Same thing with cars.
Exactly.
I mean, it works the same way. Be steady and smooth and gentle and so on, and you stay out of trouble.
If you look at the fastest race car drivers, they are so smooth.
Yeah.
And it's very deceptive, but what gets them around the track so quickly is that smoothness, because the tire's adhesion to the road can be so much greater if they're not doing twitchy things to break traction. And at the speeds that they travel, that adhesion is really critical. For most of us daily drivers, you know, we're not coming anywhere close to testing the adhesion of the tires to the road until we do dumb stuff.
Yeah, that's, excuse me, that's true. Winter tires. Can I get some for my Harley?
No.
No?
Although motorcycle tires have really come a long way. Well, I'm sure all tires have really come a long way. I mean, I think,
amazing,
you know,
on cars.
When I was growing up, you know, getting a flat tire was certainly not an uncommon experience, and today it's pretty uncommon and comparatively uncommon. And it's not that there's less debris in the roadway. I mean, tires are sort of remarkable. I mean, you know, you'd go over glass 30 years ago and think, uh-oh, am I going to get a flat tire? You could probably drive 20 miles of glass today and your tires would be fine. So they've really come a long way, and motorcycle tires have as well. You know, you now have dual compound tires so that the edges have stickier rubber and the centers have stiffer rubber, so that when the bike is heeled over and pushing laterally, that there's more grip on that part of the rubber. And when the motorcycle is going straight, which it is much more often, you know, unless you're on a road race course,
right.
The rubber is harder, like a summer tire, and therefore gets better mileage. So instead of squaring off that tire really quickly, because it's got soft compound, you sort of have the best of both worlds. And I think the ability to do that, you know, just didn't exist 2 decades ago.
Yeah, we're seeing that in car tires. Some of them now have 3 separate compounds. They'll have 3 separate tread designs for different purposes, and the compounds match the purpose of that section of the tread.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And you know, getting 60,000 miles out of tires is, you know, would have been absolutely unheard of a few decades ago, and now probably relatively common.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Providing you rotate them and do some.
Yeah, they still need tire pressure.
Right. Without air, they
still
don't
the
last
most
long.
overlooked. Tire pressure monitoring, you know, has, you know, in the last 10 years, I think all cars have come with it, 9 or 10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
But has that had an effect? I mean, do you see when the cars come into your shop, are they more likely to be properly inflated, or still?
No.
Yeah, it hasn't changed a thing.
Well, it's made it worse because
Nobody checks it anymore.
Nobody checks the tire
wow.
pressure anymore. As long as the light isn't on,
right,
everything is fine.
And it's got probably 20% before it comes on.
Right.
Yeah. So they're all
you're
20% low.
right on the edge.
And nobody checks oil anymore either.
Yeah. Oh God, it's terrible.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, I think a lot of that is because you don't have to as much. If you had a car in the 60s or 70s and you didn't check the oil for 2,000 miles, it was, there was a real likelihood that it was going to be empty.
Yeah. And probably
somebody
grenaded.
would say, what are you talking about? You didn't change the oil? You didn't check the oil for 2,000 miles? Well, of course your motor blew up. And today, I think it's pretty common for people to have never checked the oil in their car that's already 10 years old, and they go, 7,000, 8,000 miles between oil changes and so on and so forth.
Well, some cars now don't even have dipsticks.
Oh yeah, right. Keeps the debris out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Scary.
I got to make sure that I don't buy one of those cars.
It's getting harder to find them.
Really?
Yeah. I can't think of much of anything that has a transmission dipstick anymore. Not in the sense that we normally
Most people
think
didn't
of
know how
that.
to check that right anyway.
Well, that's true. And
That was probably good. That just reduced the complaints.
and more we're seeing without oil dipsticks. So
I mean, do those cars have a monitoring level where you can check and it'll say your level is
yeah.
here? Okay.
What they have is a gauge in the dash. Most of them use a thermometer,
Right.
with full and add and so on, and you turn the engine on under certain circumstances. You turn the key on and push one of the buttons and it'll bring up
So
oil
pretty
level.
soon, your hood won't even open anymore. You'll have to unbolt it when you get to the service center.
Yeah, that's about the size of
I mean, you have to unbolt so much stuff already just to get to anything important. Why not unbolt the hood and save
Yeah.
yourself the weight of the hinges?
Well,
Those latches are expensive, Pat.
Yeah, that's for sure. Hey, Lyndon, we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Lyndon about some neat gifts that just about anybody who has ever seen a Harley Davidson would love to have. Coming up on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month, but today it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. This news and views is from Auto Care Pro magazine and deals with automatic transmissions. Although their story relates to an Audi that refused to shift, it could apply to most cars. In this case, the tech did all the proper preliminary tests, including a visual inspection of related parts, which revealed a badly corroded transmission computer. Seems someone had replaced the cabin air filter and didn't properly install its cover. Now, this allowed water to leak onto the computer, and over time the water caused corrosion and no shift. A new module made the Audi shift like new. The tech also reinstalled the cabin air filter cover properly. There are two primary lessons here. First, Just because the symptoms are horrific doesn't mean the cause is horrific. In fact, seemingly huge problems may be cheap to fix. Second, this is a case where you'll probably be taken if you didn't pick a good shop. That's because you've already convinced yourself you need a major repair, and when the shop confirms what you suspect, you just go for it. This shop could have easily sold a completely unnecessary transmission, but instead was honest and saved the owner thousands of dollars. So select your shop carefully. Rather than just cheap, look for ASE certification, skill, quality, and above all, honesty. Too often the cheapest estimates come from shops with overall lower skill sets, or in some cases something much worse, more greed and less honesty.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
Hey, for those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, Lyndon Abel, All-American Harley Davidson in Hughesville, Maryland. Here in the studio, and for some substantial number of years now, he has, on this show, put together stuff for gifts.
It's a Christmas tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. All right.
Okay, so I just brought a random sample of stuff, like like I always do. Normally, I like to show off riding gear, but this is gift ideas. So we'll start with it is Harley Davidson's 115 years in business.
That's a long time. They got to be
impressive.
one of the older companies.
Yeah, I think Ford started the same year, 1903. So I think Harley and Ford are together.
Because Harley is it's an institution. It's not just a company.
Yeah, it's everything, right?
Right.
Probably not that many Ford tattoos out there. I mean, I know there's some. And there's a lot of people driving Fords, but there's not as many people with the Ford tattoos on. Anyway, there's a Harley Davidson 115th anniversary logo, and of course, this being an anniversary year, they do have a limited supply of anniversary bikes, but a lot of cool merchandise. So that's, your basic Harley t-shirt. Who can live without a basic Harley t-shirt?
Yeah.
Next. And this is a nice little package if you're looking for a quick grab it and go stocking stuffer that you don't even have to wrap. Here it is, all wrapped up. You got your hat, you got your t-shirt, you got your wristband.
Ah.
All nicely wrapped up.
Okay.
We're guys, we don't like to wrap stuff, right? So in the stocking it goes, right?
Ah, pretty neat.
All right. Continuing with the 115th anniversary theme, we should have, Steve, how come we didn't plug this in? So this is actually a lot cooler when it lights up because this neon is lit up in blue. So you got this cool little blue glow. Maybe we'll get another shot of this later on.
Okay, we'll see if we can do that.
Technical staff to tune us up a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is a CAC, right, Pat?
Yes.
CAC.
Cool-ass clock.
Cool-ass clock.
Yeah, the very one.
Hitch plug. You don't be running around with an empty hitch receiver, do you?
No.
No, of course not. And, if you're a Harley Davidson lover, what better way to show the world than a nice, rather inexpensive hitch plug? Bang.
London, would you hand me the gadget behind you, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And we'll have this set up for you in a moment.
Now, if your biker likes to cut the cheese, I think it's important to have a Harley Davidson cheese board, don't you?
Yes, I think that's very important.
You have, I believe this is genuine bamboo. Genuine bamboo. And this is genuine glass, right?
Oh, it's actual glass.
Nice Harley Davidson logo on your glass cheese board. Biker cheese boards. How crazy is that?
Yeah, somehow that seems like an anomaly.
And then something. Now, in order to cut the cheese, one must have a proper cheese knife. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So we have for
Careful
hard
with
cheese,
that thing.
we have a fork for which to fork things with. and then your basic cheese knife, right, to slice it so that you can then fork it. And then this is my favorite. This is a combination cheese knife and gasket scraper. I mean, those Evo base gasket jobs would be a lot easier with a nice cheese knife like this.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
And then after you're done cutting the cheese, it all stashes away very nicely in its own little beautiful package. Whoops.
Well,
let's try that again.
Until you hold it up.
Let's try that again. How about that? Nice, right?
Yeah.
And then Tervis cups. Man, these things have gotten crazy hot, right? They got retail stores. Anyway, this is genuine Harley Davidson Tervis cup. They come in a variety of styles. This is the cool Willie G. Skull #1 logo, which I think is awesome, but they have different styles for different tastes. And we actually have these on sale right now through Christmas.
Oh, okay.
In Linden, sir, I was too dumb to figure out how to plug it in, but there's the power cord. Hold it. And, oh, let me get that for you. And if you can figure out where to plug it in, then the
Maybe we'll do that in the next segment.
Let's try that.
Anyway, this is merely a small selection of the gifts that you could find at your local Harley Davidson dealership. But if you are close to, if you're in the Maryland vicinity, hope you'll come on down to Hughesville and see us.
Because you literally have thousands of things, from jewelry to...
It's crazy how much stuff is out there, whether it's, glasses or jewelry. I mean, it's such an iconic brand, right, having been around for 115 years and loved by an awful lot of people. Even many people who don't ride,
Yeah,
just
you
have
don't have to ride in
affinity
order to
for
love
that
a Harley.
brand. And so over the years, people have licensed that brand to make a pretty substantial, broad swath of products. You wearing one on your wrist today, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
that.
that.
As am I.
Right. Yeah, my watch. I got that from you.
Still keeping good time?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I think
As a
both
matter
them
of
made it, not
fact,
Harley.
As a matter of fact, I have some exotic watches, names that say, oh, you got one of those?
I know you took off your Rolex to put that thing on.
I did. And you know why? Because this keeps time. It actually works. And I don't have to spend $600 every year and a half to get it cleaned. So, I'm a big fan. Of course, I've been putzing around with Harleys for a long time,
Long time.
Yep.
Had a few of them. Just the ones that I know about.
Right.
Yeah.
So
people often ask me how I got linked up with you, and I said he was a customer. Came in and bought a bike, and then he bought another bike. Then he said, "Come on the show."
Right. So yeah, and it's been a fun relationship, I have to tell you.
I agree.
844-885-4677. If you have a question for Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson, give us a call. 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage will be right back.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll pocket a lot more money if you sell rather than trade your car? Perhaps, but appearance sells cars, and your poor car is a bit grungy. There's dull paint, that ugly coffee stain on the seat, and a sweaty arm stain on the door, plus crumbs in every crack and crevice. Yep, when you look close, it's kind of ugly, and sadly for you, most used cars are bought on looks more than condition. That means a good cleanup job or pay a couple $100 to have it done. Next, because many used car buyers pull dipsticks and check fluids, you should clean the engine bay and change all the fluids. Buyers usually don't know what's good or bad, but someone on the internet says smart shoppers pull dipsticks, so buyers pull dipsticks, which often leads to questions about service and possible problems. Also, if the tires show any wear, buyers may assume there are worn front end parts. Don't forget the high cost of ads so people know it's for sale, and the questions. Is there a warranty? Will you take a trade? Is it inspected? Will you take a check? Can I give you $100 down and $100 a week? And so on. Now, a biggie. You might actually be risking your life, too. Where do you safely show a car so you don't have strangers eyeballing you and your home or trying to steal the car? When you look at the aggravation, work, expense, and dangers of selling a car, trading often looks really good. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right, Lyndon Abel, All-American Harley Davidson in Hughesville, Maryland, in the studio. If you have a question, by all means, give him a call. Got the clock working, I see.
Yes, yeah, it was very complicated. Just needed a little technical expertise.
Too many moving parts.
Yeah, one.
Right. Yes. I think that's a very neat clock.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I think I need to buy one of those because I have someone in my house who loves Harley, and I have to get her something blue. She is, yeah.
Well,
so that would serve.
There you go. That's a double hit.
Right.
It's a twofer.
Yes. Hey, I see Harley, what is Cycle World magazine?
Mm-hmm.
10 best.
Yeah, their annual.
Right.
Harley, despite the fact that Cycle World is somewhat sport bike centric, Harley quite often makes an appearance in their lists. I think that there's this notion that by some, mostly purely sport bike riders, that Harleys are, some sort of antiquated, crazy thing, and not actually a performance or proper motorcycle in some way. And it's funny, those are the people that I really love to get riding Harleys, because they inevitably ride it and go, oh wow, this is great. I mean, that was my first reaction 30 years ago or whenever it was that I first rode one, after reading how terrible they were. And of course, since then they have really come a long way.
Oh yeah.
And starting in 07 and then 08 and 09, I mean, they had some really seismic changes in 07, 08, 09, and then it was relatively static for a couple of years, and then 14 they introduced the Rushmore models, which a different, much more advanced braking system, and the infotainment system with integrated GPS, and so many things. I mean, the evolution, the increase in sophistication of those motorcycles, and forward progress and evolution in the last 10 years has really been dramatic.
Well, the thing that amazed me, the one thing that everybody faulted Harley for back in the day was that they leaked oil.
Right.
And yet nobody seemed to realize that it was a total loss oiling system.
Well, it hadn't been a total loss oiling system for quite some time, but
Well, yeah, but it had a drain hole in the primary.
yeah, in the early
dripped
days,
oil, right.
So you had, I mean, in the earliest days, it really was total loss, and then when they came out with the knucklehead, which I think was 36, but I sometimes forget these dates, that went to a recirculating system, but still, you had a tin primary which was not particularly sealed well, and when it would come on and off, it would get kind of dinged up. You know, it wasn't a cast aluminum piece, it was a stamped steel piece, and, you know, a gasket can only take up so much room, right?
Yeah.
And when it starts getting a little bit misshapen, it's going to leak. And while that was technically a dry primary, it was dry. There was a drip that came down on the primary chain, and then a vacuum that was supposed to pull that oil back out of the primary. But, you know, of course it leaked. But, you know, back then it wasn't really considered to be a big deal as part of the design.
Right, but people faulted that and
Yeah.
said it's, you know, it's just pour this, pour that, and really it wasn't.
And, I mean, in those days it was, and I would say, you know, it
Well,
was
today
a
it would
fair
be.
criticism of a shovel head that they often leaked. Shovel head was a nice motor, but, you know, antiquated by modern standards. Harley had a sort of a choice to make in the early 80s of do they go with a you know, what was then a pretty conventional motor, the inline 4, and they had a couple of projects, the Nova project, which was a 4-cylinder, and ultimately decided to pursue the Evolution motor, which in retrospect was a pretty good decision. It was much more in character with their motor, and they built a motor that was largely oil tight. And the people that still criticize them for leaking oil, I mean, they were pretty oil tight. Did they leak a little bit? Sure, lots of things leak a little bit. Cars leak oil, and people just don't know about it because they got big plastic pans underneath it that catch
Right.
that stuff. And then it blows out when you're driving on the road. You know, every time you hit a dip in the road, there's a dark spot right after it.
Right.
That's where the oil comes off. Right? Everything leaks oil if it's got oil inside it. You know, very few things are hermetically sealed. But the fact is that that motor was pretty oil tight. And, you know, what really changed was people's expectations, right? You know, in the 70s, if you had a couple of drips of oil on the driveway, nobody would really think about it, whether it was your car or your motorcycle, whatever, right? That's
everything
there's
leaks.
oil in it,
Right.
and gravity works, so of course there's a couple drips in the driveway. By the time the Evo came around, that was pretty unacceptable, and what you saw as oil leaks were base gasket seepage, where you'd see a little bit of staining between the cylinder and the case of the motor. And, you know, that became unacceptable. And, you know, at this point, really seeing anything anywhere is viewed as a leak, and it doesn't happen very often. You know, so they've done a really nice job. Some of that, I'm sure, is metallurgy. Some of that is using more bolts, which is always a balance. You know, stylistically, do you want a cover that's just riddled with bolts, or would you rather have it, you know, a little more classy looking without bolts everywhere? But bolts help it seal more evenly. So
Well, you know, we've seen the same thing with cars. Go back 20, 25 years, and every car that came through the door had some kind of an oil leak. I mean, we used to do, you know, 10 valve cover gasket jobs a day some days.
But that's the owner's choice, right? Is the valve cover leaking, or is it seeping or weeping, and where do you draw that line? And would you like it to be completely oil tight, or would you like to just shut the hood and not see it?
But back then, we had tin valve covers,
Right.
stamped tin.
Right.
And those suckers, the oil would just pour out of. No question, it was a leak. You'd have these
Right.
big puddles, these long
Yeah.
lines on the ground underneath the car and so on. And gradually, just like with Harley, all of the stamped tin
Went away.
f-
Cast
yeah,
aluminum.
everything now is cast aluminum. very nicely machined.
And if you have a 4,000th or, you know, something variance, that's considered gone probably. I mean, the tolerances are so tight where, you know, even when the stamped piece was new, it had greater variation than that.
Oh yeah, and the other thing that we're seeing though is Harry homeowner gets in there with your cheese scraper here.
Oh yeah.
And has no clue, pulls the valve cover off, going to do whatever he's going to do. He's going to put a new gasket on it. Got to get rid of the old one.
Mix it up with razor blades.
And razor blades, scrapers, you name it. Some of them use a grinding wheel. And, oh, yeah. And then they wonder why they can't
with a power tool to make it even better.
Right. And, I mean, these things are accurate within 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch.
Yeah.
And that's the thickness of a hair.
Right.
And they chopping and hacking away at these. And
yeah, I mean, the casting, you couldn't get it that accurate, but that's why they're machined, to make them absolutely dead solid perfect.
Right.
A stamped steel piece, I mean, in perfect condition, before you ship it, before you handle it, it's got a greater variation than that.
Exactly. Right. And you breathe on it wrong and it distorts. Right. And
so you just, you know, use more liquid gasket sealer.
Oh, God. Yeah, we see that too.
Yeah,
Harry homeowner.
Listen, that was, you had to do that.
Yeah, but today,
yeah, right. No,
after they booger up the valve cover or timing cover or whatever.
Silicone goop that ends up in the drain holes and fry the motor.
Yeah, exactly. It winds up, usually it winds up in the oil pickup screen.
Oh, yeah, that's a great place for it.
Yeah.
Well, my oil pressure is good. I don't know what was happening.
Yeah, I mean,
there was no flow.
Yeah. No volume, nothing coming through it. Good pressure, but there's nothing there.
Right.
So overheats everything. And that really seems to throw technicians too, because you get this crap down there, and in a lot of cases, they'll get out on the highway and drive for 20 minutes or so, and all of a sudden when they come to a stop, the oil light comes on. And, you know, what's going on? So they pull over, turn the engine off, check the oil level's fine. Now you get back in, start it up, oil light's gone. And what's happening here is crud, this residue. Yeah, the suction holds it on there as long as the car is moving. Shut the engine off and it falls down.
It takes a while to find it again and plug it up again, and maybe that's after you've given it back to the customer who, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's easy to go find that thing.
Right.
Right. It's a fair amount of work to just say, well, why didn't you take a look at it? Because that would have been a couple hours of work.
Yeah, maybe. On some of this stuff, you know, you got to lift the engine and all kinds of things to get the oil pan off. And, what do you mean? You know, when I was 18, I took an oil pan off in 10 minutes.
Right.
Sorry, but
on a different car.
Yeah, and in a very different time.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the big mistakes that you see people doing with bikes?
I mean, the things that jump to mind are the things that we've talked about before that mostly have to do with failure to handle basic maintenance chores. You know, we talked about no dipsticks on cars. I think that there's a mentality of everything is sort of trouble-free these days. And I don't mean this as a criticism against riders. I think it's a natural byproduct of the way we live the rest of our lives. You know, you don't tune your computer up, you throw it away and get a new one every 3 years. I mean, if you brought your computer in for acting funny and it was 5 years old, people would look at you like you were crazy and say, well, this thing's 5 years old. I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? And your, you know, the owner's manual in your car says change the oil every 10,000 miles, which I personally would just never do.
Yeah, me too.
And things don't get checked. So, you know, I think that bleeds over into your Harley life. And I think people are also oversubscribed in a lot of things. You know, we all lead busy lives and have a lot going on, so they just don't check things. And, you know, brake fluid never gets changed. And, you know, you and I have both seen this. You know, you have a problem with the brakes, but then you go in and look at the brake fluid and it's just a gummy, nasty mess. And, you know, that was bad enough when all you were gumming up was the piston and the caliper walls and the seal, and, you know, maybe you'd have to do a caliper rebuild. In the worst of situations, the piston's pitted and maybe they got to buy a new caliper. But now you have an anti-lock system, and the pump has got all that goop in it. And, you know, one of those things is really expensive. So I think it's the lack of maintenance is probably the biggest thing. And I don't think that that's overt. I think that people just aren't thinking about that stuff. And I'm not sure how to fix it, because on motorcycles, you can't say, well, geez, it's been 6 months, so, you know, they must have put enough miles on. We got to get in touch with this person and tell them to get their bike in and get serviced. I mean, I believe you should have your motorcycle serviced at least once a year, just because things get old and they collect moisture and things like that, and you know, cables that need to be lubricated, and you want to do that at least once a year. But it's difficult to convince somebody who's maybe had a really busy year and hasn't ridden much that they need to come back in. And for other people, that year might have been 15,000 miles, and they totally forgot about it, and they're riding around with 1.5 pints of oil in their crankcase, and they've already ruined their motor. So I think that's a big one. Another one came quickly with fuel injection, and I think there's actually less confusion today. I certainly hear it less, but when fuel injection first came in with Harleys, people basically said, oh great, it's fuel injected, so I don't have to rejet the carburetor. You know, I can just put pipes on it. It's fuel injected. I don't have to do anything. And you're going, no, it's actually worse. It requires more work. The tuning is more critical. And, you know, they basically went to fuel injection so they could make it even leaner and still run properly. So, you know, with the carbureted bike, it would sneeze and spit at you more. With the fuel-injected bike, it'll do a little bit less of that, but what it's really doing is getting hot and messing up your motor. So the act of changing air cleaner, changing pipes without compensating appropriately for tuning can be disastrous. And lots of people over the years have made that mistake. And there's also so much misinformation out there, right? I mean, there were so many exhaust companies that would run ads and say, you know, 10% increase in horsepower, no retuning required. So technically, that could be an accurate statement, right? If you just put that pipe on and did a wide open throttle dyno run, because of the lack of restriction and the fact that it's running even leaner, there may be close, you know, it was probably half that. Mm-hmm. But there was some increase in horsepower. But what they're not telling you is if you ride your motorcycle around that way for a long period of time, you're going to ruin the engine. And, you know, the fact that you're getting a 10% increase in fuel mileage is not necessarily a good sign.
Yeah, right. Now, let me ask you, with ABS, is Harley like a lot of the cars that we work on, where it really isn't a do-it-yourself job to bleed the brakes, to get the pump bled?
To bleed them right.
Yeah. You can bleed the basic system.
Yeah, you can bleed from the master cylinder to here, but there is, I don't know how it works in a car, but I assume it's the exact same thing. So you can actually bleed this, but in order to cycle things through, we hook it up to digital technician, and I assume it works the same way with cars. It electronically cycles the pump so that it flushes everything through. So, yeah, I don't think that most people have made this misconception. I think the person who's likely to ignore their brakes is just going to ignore their brakes. If they're smart enough to want to change their own fluid, I think they're probably smart enough to say it's got anti-lock brakes and let me take it to the shop to do it. But I may be wrong on that. And it's not the kind of thing you see, right? Because when you're looking at the fluid, you're taking the master cylinder cap off and testing the fluid there. And if it shows, you know, dry there, you assume it's good. So I guess it's possible for somebody to have bled the brakes poorly, and I got goop in the pump, but the master cylinder,
we see it all the time clean with cars.
Because another shop has done a half job.
Well, because Harry Homeowner again, he doesn't have the tools and so on to activate the ABS pump. So he goes through and he bleeds it, and he'll come in. We tell him that it needs a new ABS pump, and that'll be what, anywhere from $800 to $4,000 depending on the car. But I have flushed my brakes religiously every year.
Really? So people are doing that job at home, but not thinking through the ABS. That's
Right.
surprising to me.
Yeah, a lot of them they'll look at the lines and say, okay, well, the line is continuous, just goes in here, goes out there, and
Well, you
but
missed that T-junction where it went over here and then it came back.
right, and they just don't seem to get it.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen a lot of that. But interestingly, Harley came out with a bulletin for owners, not for shops, saying you have to flush your brakes every 2 years, and that woke a lot of people up. You know me. I've been carrying that message for a long time and try to make sure that our shops do. But you still fight against that old saw of why do I have to do that? It's a sealed system, and like it's actually not a sealed system.
Right.
It's as sealed as they can effectively make it and still do its job. Obviously, as the pads, if it was completely sealed, it wouldn't work. The pads wouldn't be able to come further out, right? And you can have a little bit of deflection in the gasket, but at some point when that pad material is wearing down and the pad has to creep out, like what's allowing the fluid to keep coming down? If it was completely sealed, you wouldn't have the ability to put additional pressure on the pads. So, it's nicely sealed, but it's not hermetically sealed.
Right, exactly.
And moisture is going to get in there. And even stuff that's hermetically sealed, I mean, look at gauges on Harleys. They are sealed too. Well, what's that moisture doing inside there?
Yeah, you can't defy the laws of physics. All right, let's take a break. 844-885-4677. When we come back, more with Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson. And we're going to talk to Jim up in Pennsylvania. Coming up here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Do you use the proper strategy when buying replacement parts for your car or truck? Hi, I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage, and I've noticed that many of you who buy auto parts make a huge mistake. You shop for one and only one thing: price. Now, naturally, price is important, but quality is more important. When you buy the cheapest part in town, you may sacrifice quality, and less quality often means shorter life and less reliability. In some cases, the cheapest part may even compromise vehicle safety. For the best value from the parts you buy, look for the lowest price, but only on high-quality parts. When you compare prices, be sure you're comparing parts that have the same specifications. And never buy a part with a lower rating than your car requires. What many drivers don't realize is cheap can be very costly in the end. Quality usually costs less per mile over the long haul. I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
All right, folks, for those enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson is here in the studio. On the line, we have Jim from Pennsylvania. Jim, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Well, thank you so much, Pat.
Yes,
Since
sir.
you guys are talking about brake systems and things of that nature, when one gets the BG brake system flush, can we assume that all of the bleeding that you've talked about and the cycling of the ABS pump, is that part of the BG brake system flush process?
What you need to do there, because you've got a lot of different people who do these things, you need to ask the shop what their procedure is going to be, because the majority of them do it, but BG doesn't have a guidebook that tells you exactly what you're supposed to do on a brake flush or anything like that. They have instruction manuals for the equipment. This is how you hook it up, this is how you use it, and so on, but not that you have to activate the ABS and so on, that I'm aware of. So
Okay, so they in order to activate the ABS and cycle it like we're talking about, there's a different tool that does that that's probably not part of the BG power system flush machine.
right, and the reason there is that every manufacturer just about, and it may change from year to year, there's a different procedure for the scan tool that you have to use to activate the ABS system. With Lyndon and his Harleys, I think there's only one, but for us, a GM is different than an Audi, it's different than a Ford, which is different than a Mercedes, and so on. So we have to have all kinds of different software and so on to be able to do it on all cars.
Okay, so what is the minimum that a person can expect when they get the brake system flushed? It's basically just going to draw out the old fluid and suck in the new fluid. And I mean, that's pretty much the basic process. There is no real flushing that goes on, or bleeding, I'm sorry. The bleeding from either at the bleeders themselves on each of the wheels or the ABS. That's sort of
Well,
extra.
the problem is that there are cavities in the ABS system. So yes, there's going to be a couple of areas in the ABS pump that as this fluid moves through, it's going to flush debris out. But there are cavities inside that pump that the fluid doesn't move past unless the pump is active. So that's where the problem comes in, because a brake flush is nothing more than old-fashioned bleeding, except you're using a machine to do it and you're running the fluid through the system aggressively, not at extreme pressure or anything like that, but brake systems work on extreme pressure. And you're flushing all the old fluid out to get rid of the moisture and a lot of the debris. But unless you activate that pump, on most cars, not all, but most, and that's where the shop has to know what they're doing and how to do it, there will be these closed cavities that you're not going to get any fluid movement through without activating the pump. So you have to ask the shop, how are they going to do it?
Oh, okay. So I got to ask the shop. So you're cycling the ABS pump during the brake flush process.
Yeah, and in
It's
most cases.
It's not after it's been flushed.
In most cases, yes. In some cases, they want you to activate it before, then let it remain static, then do the flush, and then reactivate it. And there are different procedures for different cars.
Okay. I will check. And thanks so much for clearing that up, Pat.
Okay, take care. Ah, yes, it's for us, you know, without any kind of standardization out there. You know,
you have to have lots of different things.
Yeah.
I mean, in its simplest terms, because I think there was some confusion on Jim's part. You're taking fluid up here, and you're starting with fresh fluid, and you're bringing it all down here. So, I mean, you said it's like a standard bleed, except that you're not just trying to get the air out, you're also waiting to get fresh fluid all the way down there. And then you've got the additional component of this thing over here with some, you know, as you said, closed cavities, where if you don't open those things up, that stuff doesn't get exchanged. And while, you know, once it gets activated, you've got some clean mixed in with some dirty. As long as you're doing it, why not do it right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just get it all out of there. It just requires the proper tool. It doesn't require, you know, substantial additional effort. The problem is, you know, in many cases that cool tool can cost, you know, several $1,000s.
Yeah, that's
so, you know, for you to have that at home to do would be completely unrealistic, and paying somebody to do it is, you know, comparatively inexpensive. You know, you've paid for 20 years of brake flushes before you've paid for the tool, and oh, by the way, you switched cars a couple of times in there, so you got to keep buying a new tool.
Right. And the other side of that is that you have probably saved a lot of money in brake repairs, because without getting a proper flush, you're going to wind up with replacement calipers and all kinds of stuff, because in the automotive field, you typically don't reseal a caliper anymore.
Yeah, well, actually, even with Harley, once they went to Brembos, they don't have, you know, you can't rebuild them. There are rebuild kits, and you can, but they don't want you to do that. They want you to throw it away and put on a new caliper. And I think, you know, some people would say, and I understand this, oh, that's because they're trying to sell more calipers. I don't think so. They're just trying to make sure that your brakes don't become a problem, and then it's a liability on both the motor company and the dealership, and those things are just progressively more sensitive. I mean, the old floating single piston calipers were extremely durable, and they would pretty much last forever. They didn't break near as well as these new Brembos do, but they were very durable and very tolerant of kind of misbehavior and very easy to rebuild.
You know what we're finding, and we've got music here, but real quickly, what we're finding is that insurance companies are driving a lot of this that you don't rebuild because of the liability issue.
Yeah, I mean, if we could just get rid of a lot of lawyers, we'd probably solve some of those problems.
That's true.
I didn't say that.
Then how can people get in touch?
You can stop by and see us at All American Harley Davidson in Hughesville, Maryland, or give us a call, 301-274-5000, or find us on the web, allamericanharley.com.
All right. Looking forward to our next visit.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. And, of course, Lyndon Abel from All American Harley Davidson for being here. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, drive gently. See ya.